Ready for. Okay, welcome to Faith and Calm, class number 34. I think I can fit onto the camera here. Good, that looks a little bit better for me. Shalom Shooters will have to move it up a little bit. And tonight's topic is about the search and the discovery of for faith and calm. So as usual, I'm going to base it on the parsha and the Torah portion that happened last week, especially these parshas that we have in the. Well, that's not where I want it. I want it here. Okay. I look at the microphones and it's easier for people. Good, yes. So,
Two of you should have a sitcom, I'll tell you.
I know.
Well, I think this adds to the whole excitement of the class.
Yes.
Ozzy and Harriet are the front world.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. Any other grooming suggestions? No? Okay, fine. Okay, good. We have to laugh. Laugh at the beginning of the class. Why do you laugh at the end of your class? We should do the laughing at the beginning of the class.
So we'll have to call you to Ozzy and Harriet or something.
I know only a few of you will know who Ozzy and Harriet are.
Yes. As long as it's not the honeymooners, it's prefer the Ozzy and Harriet. So I am recording. Okay, so the topic of the class. So what's the story in the parsha is a very interesting one. It's about the very first marriage of the first Jewish marriage of two Jews, and it was of Isaac and Rebecca, or Rivka, Yitzchak and Rivka. And so it's an important lesson in life and about marriage and many things in life, not just about marriage, because Abraham married Sarah, but they were not Jewish at the time. It was before they became Jewish. So it was so this is really the first Jewish marriage. And the servant of Abraham is sent on a mission to go back to the homeland of Abraham in Haran. Oh, Haran still exists. You can find it. You look on the map, Harrn. It's right between Turkey and Syria. And that seems to be exactly where Abraham's family lived. He sent his servant Eliezer, who's only referred to as the servant of Abraham. He takes with him 10 camels and he goes and he travels back to the homeland to find the girl from Abraham's family. And when he gets there, he comes to a well and he makes a little prayer. He says, I'll give a test. The girl that comes out and I say to her, let me drink of her water. And she doesn't only just give my water from herself, but she also offers to give water to my camels. That's the right girl for my, for Yitzhak. So the first question you should ask on the story is, everybody knows that it's a Jewish, it's a halakha, it's a law that we don't search for omens. We don't use signs, Like, if you have to go to the doctor 4 times in the last week, he says, oh, God hates me and, things are terrible are going to happen to me. That's using an omen. It happened, but you don't have to use that as a sign that things are, that it's a bad week, or that if, it's, go outside and you see you were drenched by the rain. It's just like, every day is going to be like that. No, you didn't bring your raincoat. That's the problem. You should have had a raincoat. So the commentators, the Ran particularly explains, and he says that Eliezer wasn't looking for an omen. He was really doing a test, the psychological, it's a moral test. The girl that has that attitude, that she won't only just give me to drink, but the camels to drink, that would be a great shidduch. But this, of course, still leaves the question. And the question is this the only thing that you look for when you're trying to marry somebody? It's nice. You should be kind. Kind people are easy to get along with. There's a phrase in Yiddish. You call the person a a difficult person, especially schwerer Mensch, a difficult person. Difficult people are, it's very hard to deal with. Everything is a discussion, a debate, a barter. I'll get you to do this if you do this and something like that. Kind people who are giving are easy to get along with. They're pleasant and you like to be around them. So yeah, it's an important trait, but it's not. Does it seem like it's the most important thing to choose for the first Jewish mother, who's going to be the mother of all the Jewish people? So we read these stories too lightly, and that's why I bring it up in this class. And we should really pay more attention to them, and we need somebody to help us do that, because this story actually has a lot of details in it. And usually stories in the Chumash and in Torah don't go into this kind of level of detail. In a novel, you do this sort of things. You tell you all the details. Why? Because you want the person to sort of feel like they're part of the story. So you explain what they look like, what they were wearing, what the weather was like that day, what the chairs look like, what the furniture looked like, we know nothing about that usually in Chumash. We don't know how tall Abraham was. We don't know what he looked like. We don't know what Sarah looked like. We know she's pretty, and that's an important detail. So the Chumash only tells us something if it's very important to the story. If it's essential to the story, it's going to tell you that. But other than that, it just doesn't tell you anything about, whether she, what she looked like. She had to fall all her teeth. And it doesn't tell you anything. It tells you very little of what a novel would do. And here it tells you a lot of details, and we're going to go through all of them, and we're going to see how that really helps us understand this story and hopefully the stories of our lives too a little bit better. So the first thing we're told about with Eliezer is that he took 10 camels with him. Why 10? I don't know. He took 10 camels with him, and he traveled. It was a long distance to Haran. Got there in one day, but now we're going to leave that aside. It should have taken like 15 days. But anyway, he got there right away. And then he gets there. It's evening time, it tells us. Why do we have to know it's evening? I don't know. Well, it fits with the story, because that's generally, when people go to the well to collect water for the next day. So it says that Rivka came to the well at evening time, with probably a lot of other people came to the well at that time. And it says that she went down into the well, which means that there were steps. She walked down a couple steps to get to the well, and she got a pitcher of water. And then Eliezer sees her and asks her for the water. He made this little prayer in his mind, what the test would be. And then he asks her for some water to see if she's actually the right one. And she takes the pitcher off her shoulder. We have to know that too. And she brings it down and she gives him the water to drink. And then she says, and I will not only get for you, but I will get for all your camels. And she pours the water she runs over to where the camels are drinking, the trough. And she pours out the water. And then she runs back to the well, and she goes back to the camels and back to many times. She doesn't say how many times, for all of the 10 camels. So the questions are 3 here. 1, why do we have to know how many camels there are? Why do we have to know that there's a long distance and there's steps down to the well and she has to run back and forth, back and forth? Why do we have to know that she filled up the camels completely and so forth? These details don't seem so essential. And then at the end, Eliezer gives her a nose ring that weighs half a shekel and bracelets that each weigh, 2 of them that weigh 10 shekels each. And she says, you can come and you can stay with my family, and I'll give for you and your men and everybody else the water, the food and the stuff like that. What's this story telling us? And Eliezer was like shocked at this girl. So to understand the story, you have to understand a little bit about camels and camel biology. Who knows something about camels here? So camels, we know, have one big distinguishing mark on them, right? They have a hump. And that hump is made out of fat, water, and other kinds of stuff. And when the camel, as it goes, as it travels in the desert for long periods of time, that hump gets smaller, 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 and smaller until it finally finds some place where it can fill up again. And then that hump goes back to its normal size right away. So it's a very unusual animal. Did anybody here know how long a camel can go without drinking and eating?
No.
Okay,
6
now
months.
Wiki,
6 months.
yes, exactly. Somebody's a walking Wikipedia here.
I got it right. I
Exactly, 6
said
months.
6 months, but it was just a guess.
It was exactly 6 to 7 months. They say 6
You
to
know, like
7
I'm a
months.
nurse, so I know some medical stuff.
Yeah, you have to drink every day because you're not can't do like a camel. 6 months of 6
Wow.
months. It lasts 6 months. And you know what else? Another interesting fact about it is, well, imagine, like when you invite somebody over to your house, hikers, or people who have been, busy running around all day, and you say free smorgasbord the next day, and so forth. They come and you know what they do? They don't know where they're going to get their food again. So they take fast a lot of food. So you know how much a camel can drink in one sitting?
7 minutes.
This one is very hard to get.
60 gallons.
That's close. So 30 gallons in 13 minutes. Don't try this. So when camels drink, they know it's something available and they start drinking and they drink and they drink and they drink because they don't know when they're going to get it again. So what Eliezer was impressed with was this girl. She didn't just say, I'm going to provide for you. She said, I'm going to provide for all your camels. And she's running back and forth with that picture. And you could look at this and say, it's very interesting, because what would be logical, what would have happened in the story? So you come up, the girl is, according to two opinions, Rivka is either 3 years old or, as Kuni says, 14 years old, however it is. And here's now 10 camels with probably 9 camel drivers together with Eliezer, big, strong men. They come and you go over to there and you ask her, hey, I need something to drink. What would you first say? What would be the logical thing that if you were a girl, what would you say? Says, you're a big, strong man. There's the well. Go get it yourself. This is the question you should ask when you read these commission. Why doesn't she tell him the logical thing? And then she has this picture already on her shoulder because that's where you carry, because it's a lot. Imagine she's probably carrying a lot home. She's taking back home. She's not just carrying a little bit of water. She needs for clothes. She needs for drinking. She needs for the animals. She's probably it's a big picture. It says, you take it off my shoulder and then drink from it. Why should I take it down? It's hard, it's a lot of weight to move up and down.
It's true.
Why doesn't she go? This doesn't sound very nice, and so forth. And then, she has to go down to the well and over, and then to the camels. I mean, how many times did she have to make this trip? 30 gallons. They're going to drink a lot, and the Torah says twice. They drink everything, their entire fill. So this is what Eliezer was shocked at, is he says he was looking for somebody who was kind, but this is like kindness on steroids, it's just like, completely it blows you away how kind she was. And when he saw that, he really was very impressed, and he said, this is an unusual girl, and this I have to have for Avraham, because we know that Avraham also had, Amram's family, Amram was also kind. He wanted to even feed the Arabs that came there. He had an open house and so forth, and this is one of the basic traits of Jews. They are kind people. They are chesed people. They like to do things for other people. And when we see people who are stingy, self-centered, egomaniacal, it just drives us crazy, because we like, we're giving people. Now you might think that, if you gave advice to Rivka, you'd say, listen, 3 years old, you're doing this for everybody like this, you better learn to say no, because people are going to take advantage of you and they're going to exploit you. And when you grow up, you need to set boundaries, because the world is not all nice people and just doing kindness to everybody. But Rivka was not naive. And how do we know this? From the next story in the Chumash, which has a story with birthright, Yaakov and Esav. Yitzhak loved Esav. He liked Yaakov. He liked both, but and Rivka Rivka knew that Yaakov was the one who had to get it. So she pulled out all stops. She was a clever person. She did all sorts of tricks. She dressed up Yaakov in those sheepskins and so forth like that. And she made sure that Yaakov got the blessing. This is not a pushover girl. This is a lady who knew who she was, where she's going, what she's doing. And she was savvy. So she was in no way somebody who's just like, who was a dependent person, a pleaser or something like that. She didn't have those kind of issues. Some people do. They need to, they need to feel good. They need to give to other people because they have a deep sense of insecurity. That was not Rivka. She was giving because she just liked to give, and not because she was trying to do something because she felt bad about herself. That's the marker. She felt good about it afterwards. If she had not, and this was actually some sort of psychological problem that she had to be a people pleaser, then she would have felt drained and terrible the next day. And she didn't feel terrible about it. She felt good about herself. I did something for somebody else and I gave somebody some water and so forth like that. So she actually felt good about herself. So here we have a marker for the Jewish people. This is an important trait. This is one of the three fundamental traits of the Jewish people, that they don't like to brag about themselves. They're bashful, that that they're kind, and that they have rachmanis. They have mercy on other people. Now the question still remained on the table. Why didn't she just tell Eliezer, get it yourself? So the answer is, interestingly enough, that she realized that he was probably strong, but if he's asking me for the water, he probably would have gotten it himself if he could have. So according to the Malbim and Nechama Leibowitz, who this story comes from, she made a calculation in her head. There must be something wrong with him. He must have some problem with his arms or his legs, or he can't move, or he can't get down to the well. If he's asking me for the water, obviously there's a problem there, so I will get him some water. So she goes and she gets the water for him. She doesn't ask him to do it. She does it herself. And then this is the Beis Yosef, the Beis Achayim, the father of Rabbi Soloveitchik says. And then once somebody drinks of it, she had a little sense of decency, and she said, I can't bring back the water to my family after this guy drank from the pitcher. So I will pour it out to the camels. But I don't want to make him feel like I'm doing something terrible. I'm just pouring it out to the camels because he drank from it, because I don't know what diseases he has or anything like that. So she offers to just do it all for all the camels. So she had a very refined sensibility. She wanted to make sure that he had he didn't feel embarrassed. So this is also an interesting trait. So to connect this with a more contemporary story, slightly more contemporary story, there was in 1945, the previous Skulana Rebbe, whose name was Eliezer Zissel Portugal. And so the Skulana Rebbe was a small town in northeastern Romania. So after World War II, he survived the war, and he was in northeastern Romania, and he was in the town of Chernovitz. And this was 1945. It was Soviet-occupied Romania, and later he came out, and I think he went to the United States. But then 1945, it came Pesach time. In Pesach time, he wanted to make matzahs, but it was very hard to find wheat, and he wanted to find shmurim wheat. So he finally found some wheat that was watched, and he was able to make a small number of matzahs. And he said, it can't be just for me. He's going to do it for everybody else. So he put out an advertisement saying, anybody who needs a matzah, I will give them one matzah. And if you're a rabbi supporting having a community seder, I'll give you 3 matzahs. So like 2 weeks before Pesach, he heard a knock at the door. There was a guy named Moshe Hager, who was the son of the Vishnitzer Rebbe, called the Sverd Vishnitzer Rebbe. He came knocking at the door, came from Chernovitz. Chernovitz actually is where my mother's family comes from. Vishnitz, Chernovitz, Vishnitz Rebbe, Vishnitz Chassidim. And he came to the door and he asked for matzahs. So I said, you're going to do a community seder? Yes, I gave him 3. And he says, no, no, no. My father says I must come back with 6.
Mm.
And the School Rebbe says, I really can't. I calculated. I can give 3 to you. He says, he's not budging. My father said, ask for 6. So he stood there and he argued until finally the School gave in and gave him 6. Time goes by. It's Pesach. It's the few hours before Pesach. He hears a knock at the door, and this guy, Moshe Hager, is back again. And he asks, what do you need? And Moshe Hager says, do you have any more matzahs? And he says, no, I gave them all out. And so Moshe Hager asks the Skolin Rebbe, he says, and what about for yourself? And the Skolin Rebbe says, well, this morning I had 3, but people came to the door, they needed matzah, and I gave my matzah away too. I didn't think I'm any better than anybody else. So Moshe Hager says, that's exactly what my father expected. So here, I have 3 matzahs that we have from the 6. I'm coming to give you the matzahs. So you should have a Seder. So this is the Jewish people. This is the Jewish people. You know, he knew that he was going to give away all his matzahs. So he said, you can have the matzahs. And this is a trait of Jewish people. And this is stood us by, you know, the idea of being open and wanting to give and warm to other people and helping other people and not looking to calculate, you know, how I will do if you will do and so forth, because that's the end of marriage. You know, once you start calculating, you know, if he does this, then I will do this for him. And he will do this. If I do this for him, that's a business anymore. It's not a marriage. So this is the foundation of marriage and of relationships is in, you know, you don't necessarily calculate. You're not a hard person. You say, you know what you need. Now you have to be able to discriminate. There are people out there who have psychological problems and they will just take and take and take from you. But like we said, Rivka was not no pushover. She knew when she was dealing with an Esav and what, you know, you give and you don't give it to and so forth. But in general, the idea is it's not bad to be a giver. It's not bad to want to help people. It's not bad to, it's a very Jewish thing to want to feel, you know, and it makes you feel good. And that, you know, in giving, you know, you discover that giving is better than taking. And, or as they say about in Hebrew, the word for no saying is, you know, is a palindrome. It can be read both directions. So when you give, you get back, but you don't give with a calculation to get back. It's just give, and then you get in whatever form you'll get and so forth. And I think the second point that I just wanted to finish with, which also it says that last week was Chayei Sarah. So it says all her days were good, 127 days were good. And the question is, of course, years, 127 years, all of the years were good. Now we know that a lot of the years were not good. She didn't have children until she was very old, and she had a lot of suffering, and her son was almost sacrificed on the Akedah, and she didn't have children, and she was captured by Paro and so forth. So how can you say every day was good? So the answer is not all our days are good. And some days we have some weeks we have very tough weeks, and sometimes we have a lot of difficulties and so forth going on. But you know, if you keep your eye on the ball and you know where you're headed and you know that you're doing the mission and so forth, then the end is that they all are good. They all are brought into an aspect of good. And so I'll finish with this little story, which I think also illustrates that idea. So there was a famous Chabad Chassid. His name was Mendel Futterfass. He lived in Russia. He was in 1947. He was thrown into Gulag. He was there for almost 10 years in the camps, and he finally got out when Stalin died in 1956. And one of the ways that he kept his joy and his happiness, and he was just a warm, friendly guy. He was friendly with everybody. And one of the people that he got to know in the Gulag was, he met a lot of interesting people there, musicians, artists, circus performers. He got friendly with this one circus performer who was a high wire guy. He used to go on the high wire. And Mendel never heard of this sort of thing before. You know, it's a very strange thing. When Stalin died, even everybody wanted to celebrate. Not that they couldn't celebrate that Stalin died, but that the camps were going to close down and that everybody was going to go home. And even the guards were celebrating. So what they did is they set up, he said, you know, now I can actually do my circus act for everybody. So they set him up with a high wire and they put up a wire between two poles. And he started very slowly walking from one end to the other, to this end to that end. And it was really amazing. And then he started going faster. And then he asked people to throw chairs to him. And, you know, he was, and Mendel was watching the guy the whole time. And when he was done, he asked, he says, how did you do this? How are you able to walk back and forth on this wire and catch all these things and do all this other kind of stuff? So the guy said back to Mendel, he said, I saw you were watching me very carefully. You tell me how I did it. He says, I noticed very carefully what you were doing. And the answer was that, you know, you never looked down. You always just looked at the goal where you're headed. And he said, that's exactly right. That's exactly it. Otherwise, then you think like you're just walking on ground because, you know, anybody can walk a straight line. So as far as he was concerned, he walked a straight line. So Mendel said this was a lesson he repeated over and over again in his life. He says, you know what? The secret in life is you don't look down at all the things, all the chasms, all the falls, all the difficulties that you could have. Sarah never did do that. She walked forward. And same with Eliezer, you walk forward, you keep your focus on what you're supposed to be doing, and you don't look at all the terrible things that could possibly happen this way and that way and this way and that way. And the trickiest movement is, of course, is when you have to go to the end and turn around, because then you have to take your eyes off the goal and you have to look and you have to go back the other way. That's the trick. So don't, you know, whenever you take your eye off the where you're going, that's where you tend to get into the most trouble. So I give you, all of you in here, a blessing. As the famous Breslover song goes, you know, Kol Olam Kulo, Gesher Tsar Ma'od, the whole world is just a narrow bridge, V'ha'ikar, but the main thing is Lo Lefached Klal, don't be afraid of anything. And that's what they sing over and over again, and nobody knows that better than the Breslovers because they've been through it, you know. The whole thing is the world is a very narrow bridge, it's a tightrope. Life is like that. It is a tightrope, and you just have to keep going straight, focused. Where can I have a success? What can I accomplish? And don't look down because there's lots of, it's not good to look down. You'll fall. So keep your eye focused on the end goal and everything will turn out good. And my wife is going to hopefully blend into this conversation. And good, we are recording, and I think yep.
Yecheskel Shimon.
Yep.
Was Rebecca a prophet? I mean, did you say she was a prophet?
Actually, all of them had some level of prophecy. I'm actually going to speak a little bit about that. I'm just going to mention it.
We know Sarah was.
She reminds me of Miriam, because Miriam as a little girl had great wisdom and, you know, foresight, or
yeah,
she seemed to.
I know they list the prophets, you know, I know Esther was listed as a prophet, Sarah was listed as a prophetess, who else is a prophetess? But Devorah is a prophetess. I think there's 7 of them that are listed.
Rachel, maybe? Rachel.
7
famous ones.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't be surprised that she didn't have it, because obviously she saw these 2 kids, you know, Yaakov and Esau, and she had the better insight than Yitzhak on who was the future. And it says that, you know, God told Abraham, he said, everything that Sarah tells you, listen to her because she sees better than you. And generally, that's certainly the kid. That's what Torah recommends, is that the husband should listen to the wife, especially about domestic matters, because she probably has a better insight into what's going on.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay, now. Okay, hello everybody. Hi Al, hi Molly, hi Sari, hi Amy. Okay, good. So, okay, so I'm going to begin as usual with the 4 things that I say, and because they're very, very important to remember. And the first thing is that we are in a remarkable time, and and we know that that's the case because the Lubavitcher Rebbe who made amazing predictions, and they all came true, also told us that we are in the beginning of the redemption of the whole world. And if you think about it, you know, the events of the past year are so preparatory for a redemption, for a global redemption, because I would say before this past year, the world was drunk with excess and drunk with ease. You know, there was everything was, you know, everything was at our fingertips. You could order anything. You can still order whatever you want, but life, there was a lot of excess, and I think that if the geula happened at that point, people would say, I don't know, I've got everything. And now I don't know a single person who isn't strained, who isn't stretched, who isn't beyond their, in Hebrew we say beyond their keli. That means they're beyond their vessel. They can't be contained in their vessel. They're searching. So I think everybody's going to be very happy and everybody's going to be very accepting. So the second point is that we're a unique generation, that we are the generation, we know that the generation of the Geula is the same generation that came out of Egypt. We're their reincarnation. And we have unique strengths because of that. And we also know that Hashem gave us tools to deal with what's ahead of us and what we're dealing with right now. And those tools are Torah, mitzvos, and incredible leaders like Moshe, and today like the Rebbe. And the last thing I always say is that tonight we are accomplishing by learning Torah and by learning Hasidus in particular, we are preparing ourselves and the world for the redemption. So I want to do a tiny review of something that I said last week, and that is that we were talking about Sarah's laugh. We were talking about the power of joy, and we mentioned that that although you know, everybody knows the story that Abram and Sarah were informed that they, at the ripe ages of 90 and 100, they would at last have a baby, and we know it says that Sarah laughed, and you know, me, 90, she was 90 years old. She had been married since she was 15. She was way beyond, it says right in the Torah, she was way beyond the way of women, which is a nice way to say she was way beyond her cycle time. She didn't do that anymore. And her body was withered. And she said, this withered body is going to have a baby. And she laughed. And there are commentators that criticize her for that laugh. And indeed, Hashem says in the Torah, he asks Abram, he said, does Sarah think that anything is beyond me? And so, but as you know, we mentioned a Hasidic story that explains that what happened after that laugh. After that laugh, Sarah became pregnant. She and the laugh actually opened a vessel for her. It opened her ability to have children. And there's one detail that I left out last week that I would like to bring in this week, and that is that we know that she was able to have Yitzhak because she laughed, and they named him Yitzhak, which means laughter. But there's an expression. What does it say in the Chumash? What does it say in the Torah when it said that Sarah laughed? It says, "V'titzchak Sarah b'kirba." I wrote it out for you. V'titzchak Sarah b'kirba. Now, if you look carefully, Sarah is in the middle. And then there's this word here, Vatitzchak. What does Vatitzchak sound like?
Yitzhak.
Yitzhak. His name is hinted to in that word, Vatitzchak, and it means to laugh. And his name means to laugh. Vatitzchak Sarah, and then it says Bekirba. And if you unscramble Kirba, what word do you have? Anybody have a guess?
Well,
You
I
have-
was thinking of Karev. What's a Karev?
Okay.
Is that a grave?
No, okay. No. You have the word Rivka. You have his future
Oh,
wife.
Rivka.
So with that laugh, she not only gave birth to the Jewish people, Yitzchak, but she gave birth to his wife. She not gave birth to his wife literally, but she created the vessel. She created the potential for Rivka. And you know, we're told that there are a few things, there are many different things that create a vessel for blessing, but there's hardly anything that is bigger than two things. One is peace. Peace, I think, is the most enormous vessel for blessing that exists. That's what Judaism teaches. Peace within yourself and peace with others. It is an enormous vessel for blessing. But another enormous vessel for blessing is simcha, is joy. And simcha has many of the same letters as Mashiach. So anyway, tonight, that was a review from last week. And tonight I want to talk about a different vessel, the same vessel that Haskell Shimon was talking about, a vessel for blessing, and that's kindness. And he told you the whole thing about Rivka, and I'll just do it because I didn't know he was going to do it. I'll show you. For my class, I made some teaching things. I made Rivka with a bucket. And then I wanted to show them how much she had to do for one camel. This is for one camel. And there were 10 camels. So anyway, kindness is a Jewish thing, and thank God, thank God it's a Jewish thing. We've helped each other exist. We've helped the world exist really throughout its entire existence since the Jewish people were founded, and as Haskell Shimon said, our founders, Avram and Sarah, were incredible. They were the only, eventually they became, they created the Jewish people. And, but before then, they did kindness with thousands and thousands of Arabs, whoever was living there, the Canaanites, not really Arabs. But whoever was in the land, they had an inn, they fed people for free. They taught people about God. They did an incredible things. So I'm going to show you, there's a little story, a modern day story that I want to tell you about the power of kindness. And first of all, it's based on, there's a children's book, there's a manufacturer of children's books, Jewish children's books called, I don't know if you can see it, if it's in focus, I'll go a little back, maybe. It's not focusing. It's called Chachai. Maybe I'll have to put it further back. It's called Hachai. They're magnificent publishers of children's books. Their books have tochen. They have value, and this is actually a true story about a woman. It's called As Big as an Egg, and it's a true story about a Jewish woman whose name was Hinda Deitch, and she was called Bubby Hinda. The entire community called her Bubby Hinda. And what she did was in the First World War, in Russia, in Samarkand, which was in the eastern reaches of Russia, Asian reaches of Russia, I believe. During the war years, there was no food. So people would stand in bread lines, and each person would get a small loaf on Monday and a small loaf on Thursday. And it wasn't much to subsist on. There was nothing else. They would eat bread and water, hot water. That's what they would eat. If they were lucky, they had tea. And so everybody, it was very, very precious to them, that little loaf. And what she did is that she would stand there when people were getting their things, and every Jew that she saw, she would say, please, break off a piece of your bread. And she had an enormous sack, and she said, there are so many Jews who are sick and who cannot stand in line, and they have nothing to eat, and I'm going to bring it to them. And people would, and you could see what an incredible person. Everybody knew her. And so almost pretty much nobody, I'm going to close this door. It was very hard. It was very hard for people to resist her. Very, very hard and I'm not going to tell you the story. You can read it in the book. It's a true story. And, but I'm going to tell you a story. My point tonight is that kindness, first of all, is, it's like water. It's for your own soul, for our own soul. It helps us. It helps us tremendously. And also Hashem pays us back. And so I want to tell you a little story about her son, David Deitch. And I know the Deitch family. When I first went to Crown Heights, when I first dated Haskell Shimon would stay in the Deitch house. And not David Deitch, but probably David Deitch's son, or maybe grandson, I don't know. But anyway, David Deitch was a Lubavitcher Chassid. He was Bubby Hinda's son. And this story took place in 1958. Now, when the Rebbe would encourage people to give tzedakah, Jews are required to give 10% of their income to tzedakah, and it's recommended to give 20% if you can. But tzedakah we give, we for sure give. And it's something, it's very interesting. It doesn't, even people who don't, even Jews who have completely forgotten about Torah and were never introduced to it by their parents, they're very, very generous. It's just like there's no people on earth that gives charity like the Jewish people. There's nobody that even comes close. So anyway, the Rebbe would encourage people to give tzedakah, but he usually would not tell people how much to give. He would leave it up to them. But for some projects were so important that the Rebbe would actually make suggestions. And so in 1958, there was a community in Israel called Kfar Chabad. And Kfar Chabad it didn't have rich people in it. It had a lot of Russian immigrants, and they were poor and they were farmers, and they needed to expand. They needed to expand Kfar Chabad. So the Rebbe made a drive. He had a big, at one of his public speeches, he said, I need people to contribute to this, and I need people to contribute to it very generously. And if a person doesn't contribute generously, I might make suggestion as to what they should do. And if people think that I'm being unrealistic or what I'm asking for is out of the question, they should know that Hashem will answer their contribution, whatever they get. Hashem will give them back fourfold, whatever they gave. So anyway, so people started, it wasn't a Shabbos or a holiday. And so people wrote down on slips of paper what they were prepared to contribute, and they sent it up to the Rebbe's table. And the Rebbe started reading them privately. He didn't do it out loud. And then he came to one, he said, David Deitch, double that. And he closed it up. So David Deitch, Bubby Deitch's son, David Deitch had pledged $15,000. In 1958, $15,000 could buy a brownstone in Crown Heights. Today, a brownstone in Crown Heights goes for well over $1 million. And they were new in 1958. They were beautiful. And so he pledged the price of a house. It was way beyond his abilities already, just way out there. And the Rebbe told him to double it. The next morning, David Deitch didn't wait a second. He ran to the bank. He didn't give it a second thought. He ran to the bank and he said, I need a banknote for $30,000. I need a loan for $30,000. And they said, you have to put up collateral. You can't just get a loan. He said, I'll put up my house. But his house was only worth $16,000. His brownstone was only worth $16,000. And so he said, fine, I'll mortgage my business. I'm mortgaging my business. Take my business too. So he mortgaged his business and his home. He got the check for $30,000. He ran to the Rebbe's secretary, Rabbi Label Groner, who I also had the privilege of Yaskel Shim and I had the privilege of eating at his Shabbos table. May his soul have an elevation. And he just passed away this year, a remarkable person. So anyway, so he gives $30,000. He has no idea how he's going to pay this back. Absolutely no idea. He's mortgaged everything down to the grass. And shortly afterwards, he gets a phone call from a friend. David Deitch was in the fabric business, and he gets a phone call from a friend. And the friend said, there was a fire in a fabric factory in Boston. And the owner is telling people to come and pick up burned bolts, pick up whatever pick up the remnants. And so he took a truck. He went straight up to Boston, and he took 10 bolts and he put it in his truck. The owner comes out, and David Deitch and he stops David Deitch, and he's thinking, oh, maybe I took too many. Maybe he's upset with me. And the owner said, how many did you take? And he said, I took 10. He said, no. Fill your truck. And so that's what he did. He filled his truck. He brings it back to New York. He unrolls the bolts, and to his shock and amazement, only the outer layer is burned. And not only that, they're extraordinarily expensive fabrics. He was able to sell what he had for $90,000. He paid back the bank immediately, and he had $60,000 in surplus. He runs to the Rebbe with a check. He made a check for $60,000. He says, here, Rebbe, this is for you. And the Rebbe said, this is for me? And so Deitch said, yes. And the Rebbe said, no, this is for you. put it in your bank and be matzliach, be successful. David Deitch became so magnificently successful that, let's see if I can pull it up here, that first I have to share screen. Share screen. He was magnificently successful. The entire Deitch family was magnificently successful. And for example, this is just one thing that he did. It's, it's like it's one of those, whatever you call it. You can't really, it's a normal building. It's not a round building. It's a normal building, but it's a beautiful building right on Eastern Parkway. They created they dedicated a new building for one of the largest schools in Oale Torah, which is one of the largest schools in Crown Heights. And I've gone to many weddings there, including Sarah Rudkin. So anyway, they became fabulously wealthy. When the Rebbe says something, the Rebbe keeps it. And not only that, charity itself is a vessel for blessing. And what if a person doesn't have money? What are you going to do? So there's many, many, many ways, right? And as we all know, like the biggest charity of all is to notice somebody else. There's nothing bigger than that. Nothing bigger than noticing somebody. And looking at them like you really see, you really get what's going on with them. And people are so sorely missing that now. And so that's an easy thing for us to do. So anyway, I want to end with a little insight that the Rebbe gives from Lubavitcher Rebbe gives from this week's. Tonight is a special day, right? Tonight is Rosh Chodesh Kislev. Tonight is the beginning of the Hebrew month of Kislev, and Kislev is the month of miracles. The Rebbe himself had a tremendous miracle on this date in probably 1977. He had on Simchas Torah a massive heart attack, massive. He was in 1977. He was 76 years old. And he had such a massive heart attack. I'll tell you the story about the heart attack some other time. It's a story in its own right. And he was all better by Rosh Chodesh Kislev. Rosh Chodesh Kislev is called a day of redemption. And I give a blessing to everybody. There should be a redemption for each one of you for any problems you have.
And to you as well.
Amen. Thank you. Amen. Thank you. And so the Devar Torah, the little message I have is about troubles. When you have troubles, what is the response to troubles? So there is in a sikha, in a talk that the Rebbe gave on this date, Rosh Chodesh Kislev, in 1992. The Rebbe said that he said a Madrish about the moon. Now everybody probably knows that the moon is compared to women, right? And the moon is also compared to the Jewish people for different reasons. It's compared to the women because it has a cycle. It gets bigger, it gets smaller, it has a cycle. And women's cycles are tied to the moon. And it's also compared to the Jewish people because the Jewish people go through cycles also of renewal. They get smaller, they get bigger, they go through good times, they go through squeezing tight times. It's not like the sun, every day the same, not at all. So anyway, there's a Madrish. What is a Madrish? A Madrish is a Torah teaching, and it gives a deep truth. And sometimes that deep truth has to be told in terms of a parable, because it can't be told in any other way. And so there's a parable about the moon, and the parable goes like this: that when Hashem created the sun and the moon, they were originally the same size, and the moon came to Hashem and said, this doesn't really work so well. There can't be two kings in the sky. There has to be one king. In a kingdom, it doesn't work. Two kings don't work. It's much better with one king. One of us should be big and the other one should be smaller. And Hashem said, great idea. Go reduce yourself. He said, L'chi uma'ati. Go and reduce yourself. Great idea. I agree with you. And the moon was devastated because it expected to be its idea. It expected to be the big one. And Hashem gives it the stars as compensation. So that's the Medrash. So so seemingly what Hashem told the moon is it's not a nice thing. It's a punishment. It's a curse. It's like, what did I end up with this? So it seems like a big tsuris, big trouble. And we have to know also that, it's an amazing thing about troubles. Troubles make us feel small. They make us feel small and incapable. They squeeze us. And the Rebbe says all that is true. And if all that is true, why does the Madrish say, Lechi uma'ati, go and reduce yourself? Rebbe said it doesn't make any sense. It should just say reduce yourself. Why does it say go and reduce yourself? No Torah, nothing in Torah is verbose. Nothing is, it's not because, it's an expression, go and do it. No, nothing is done because it's an expression. Every letter and every word is weighed out. And the Rebbe says go means progress. It doesn't mean regression, it means progress. Why did Hashem say go and reduce yourself? Because the Rebbe said that any diminishing that a Jew feels in their life, anything that makes you feel squeezed, anything that makes you feel tight, anything that makes you feel small, you have to know that it's in order to elevate you to a place where you could never have reached without the squeezing. And it elevates you to a place in no comparison to where you were before. So, and that is, the Rebbe said that, and for that, the word go is suitable because it's going, you're going places. And in Hebrew, there's a very important expression called Yerida Tzarich La'aliyah. It's the down that must precede the up. So, so I've told the story before, but I'll mention it again. That we were lucky enough to help one kid a little bit in his life, and we witnessed whatever, we were with him throughout his, since he was 7, 8, and we were with him throughout his we were part of his life throughout his teen years. And I never saw a teenager go through what he had to go through. And I've told you, everybody in our shul was pulling out their hair. How could God do this to this person? And the only thing that I say, for other people, you have insight more than you do for yourself. And I told this person again and again, I have no idea why God is doing this. I have no idea at all. I only know one thing, and that's that God is building you. God is building someone here. He doesn't do this for nothing to somebody. He is building. You're going to see that because of all this, you are going to be somebody different. You're going to be somebody that's able to help people in a way that other people cannot. And that's exactly what happened. Exactly what happened. But the thing is, we have to tell it to ourselves too. When we are squeezed, we have to say, Hashem is not destroying me. Hashem is building me. This is building me, and I will see Hashem's kindness. And anyway, and there's another expression that's worthwhile knowing in Hebrew, and that is nothing bad comes from heaven, and everything comes from heaven. You have to know that. So anyway, we have to have patience, and we have to have hope, and we have to have trust. So with that, I'm going to end with mitzvahs are a tremendous challenge. No, they're tremendous. They're not a challenge. They're a tremendous channel for blessing. And candle lighting is incredibly early this week. It is at 4 p.m. sharp in Brighton. So that's 18 minutes before sunset. If you're further east, if you're in Brookline, you should take off a minute. And if you're in Lexington, you can add a minute or so. So anyway, I want to wish everybody a wonderful week. I'm going to turn off the recorder.